we started last time, the division of tax burden, and you had written something about it, no?
Yes, ma'am.
The three facts you have written?
Yes, ma'am. 3 points.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So after this, we are talking about the theories which are developed for the distribution of tax burden over a period of time by different economists. So we start with that presentation. Just give me a second. This you have written expediency theory.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So right here, there are three sets of theories. There are three set of theories on which the tax proposals are generally developed. On which the tax proposals are generally developed. And the suggestions are made for the distribution of tax burden. First basis, a taxation theory may be derived on the assumption. A taxation theory may be derived on the assumption that there need not be any relationship. There need not be any relationship between taxes paid and the benefits received from state activities. In this we have two theories. In this we have two theories, namely socio-political theory and expediency theory. Socio-political theory and expediency theory. Now the second point, second base. A taxation theory may be based on a link. A taxation theory may be based on a link between tax liability and state activities. tax liability and state activities. This logic yields two theories. This logic yields two theories, namely benefits received theory, benefits received theory, and cost of service theory. So benefits received आपको डिटेल में करना है. And the third base, this approach assumes that tax liability, you can see on the screen it's written, tax liability should be appointed on the basis of comparative ability to pay of the taxpayers. This gives us ability to pay theory. ये भी आपको डिटेल में करनी है. So these two theories are in detail in your course. One is benefits received theory and the other is ability to pay theory. And others we will do in very short. You must know, that's why we will be just touching them. So the first set of theories, as you have already written in the first point, that it talks about those theories or the assumption where there may not be any relationship between the taxes paid and the benefits received from the state activities, right? So that means whatever you are paying is irrespective and not connected with the benefits received. And in this, the first theory is which you have written is socio-political and expediency. So we will start with expediency theory. This theory asserts that every tax proposal must pass the test of practicability. ये important है. That means practically कितना feasible है किसी टैक्स को लगाना, ये सबसे important है as per this theory. That means economic and social objectives of the state as also the effects of a tax system, which you have already done, should be treated as irrelevant. That means for what you have elected the state, whatever economic and social objectives the state has to fulfill, what are the effects of a tax system on production, economic growth and distribution and stabilization, these things become irrelevant in this theory. That means it is useless to have a tax which cannot be levied and collected efficiently. Efficient mechanism needs to be ensured. Then the administrative setup may also need not be efficient enough to collect the tax at a reasonable cost of collection. So what we want an effective administrative setup also. So this is about expediency theory in a nutshell, that it emphasizes more on the practical aspect. It emphasizes more on the implementation part of the taxation system rather than linking the benefits to the taxes, what you are paying. The second theory, in the first base only, you have written about socio-political theory. Now, when we talk about this, socio-political theory, there is a name which you can remember here, Adolf Wagner. वैगनर की थ्योरी अभी हम आगे पब्लिक एक्सपेंडिचर में भी पढ़ेंगे. So Adolf Wagner advocated that social and political objectives should be the deciding factors in choosing taxes. So it's different from the first one because it talks about for what the government is elected, what are the social objectives for which you have elected the government, what are the political objectives for which you have elected the government. So these will become the deciding factors in choosing taxes. And that is why Wagner and the other German economists also following him did not believe in individualist approach to a problem. That means they were of the opinion that each economic problem should be looked at its social and political context. You can't limit it to one individual. That problem of taxation is not related to one individual, but the context should be social and political. And accordingly, an appropriate solution should be found. Why? Because the society consisted of individuals, but more than the sum total of its individual. It has its own existence and entity, which needed preservation and taking care of. That means there is a social fabric, which you must have heard of a society. Whether you have illiteracy, it is not individual. Whether you have more population, it is not individual. Whether you have malnutrition, it is not individual. They are all social problems. Whether you have crime record against women rising, that is also a social problem. So the society has its own entity. The social fabric is itself embedded in the society in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of its cultural roots, which cannot be talked about as an individual problem. So what we need, we have to preserve those values, we have to take care of them, we have to find an appropriate solution according to social and political context. So that is the rationale around which Wagner gave his socio-political theory. That's why this theory is known as socio-political theory, because social and political objectives are important, social and political fabric of the society is important, and on the basis of that you are deciding the taxation system. He was advocating a modern welfare approach in evolving and adopting a tax policy, in favor of using taxation for reducing income inequalities. For example, he gave the example to make his point more clear: private property and inheritance. They were the result of state policies. That means the state had such policies that it gave rise to the rise in the private property, the inheritance rights, which resulted in inequalities in income and wealth distribution. So it's not a God-given right that some people have more property, some people have less property, but it's a kind of social mechanism which has increased the inequalities in the society. अब स्टेट का काम क्या होगा इसमें, जब स्टेट की पॉलिसीज के रिजल्ट के बाद ही, उनके एक्शंस के रिजल्ट से ही ये प्राइवेट प्रॉपर्टी और इनहेरिटेंस डेवलप हो रहा है. सो स्टेट हैड द राइट टू कंट्रोल द ओनरशिप ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी and its inheritance in the interest of society as a whole. That becomes a social objective. That becomes the welfare objective of the state, to control the ownership of property, to reduce income inequalities. Okay, so that is why a modern government, progressive taxation is the rule rather than an exception. If we want to curb the inequalities, then what we should do? We should use taxation to curb inequalities, especially this is a form of taxes which you have already studied, progressive taxation system. So this is the rule which we need to adopt. It should not be exception कि हम कहीं कहीं उसको लगाएंगे. If we want to curb the inequalities, then we have to make it as a rule that higher income groups will need to give more in terms of taxes to reduce inequality, if this is our purpose. Similarly, Tax policy should be effectively used for several purposes, such as fighting cyclical fluctuations, unemployment, production of undesirable goods and services, monopolist and restrictive trade practices, hoarding, and so on. So this I will send you on WhatsApp this whole file. But the thing is, this is how you must understand the difference between the first base, on the basis of which these two theories have been given by different economists, who said that as per the social political theory, the social political objectives of the state becomes important, for which the state is elected for the society, not for an individual. So the problem of taxation should also not be of an individual. Is it clear? Please say yes if it is clear, if it is
Yes,
not clear. Okay. Now we come to the second set of theories, the second point which you have written. That is the benefits received theory. The second base on which you have written is that it links the tax liability with the benefits received. That means whatever the government is providing in terms of goods and services, if you are getting more benefit, then you will be liable to pay more. If you are getting lesser benefit, you are liable to pay less. That is the main proposition around which the benefits theory, received theory, is based on. If you see, the theory proceeds on the assumption that there is basically an exchange or contractual relationship between taxpayers and state. There is a qui pro quo relationship. In other words, अगर आप टैक्स की डेफिनेशन पहले लिख चुके हैं, उसमें आपने क्वी प्रो क्यो का कंसेप्ट लिखा था. So now this theory talks about that there is a qui pro quo relationship, there is an exchange relationship, there is a contract relationship between taxpayer and state. State is providing you state services, you pay the state tax to maintain those goods and services. See, the state provides certain goods and services to the members of society, and so they contribute to the cost of these supplies in proportion to the benefits received. And that is why it's called qui pro quo setup. There is no place for socio-economic objectives here. There is no place for issue of equitable distribution of income and wealth. Instead, the benefits are taken to represent the basis for distributing. इसमें हम benefits received को base बना रहे हैं. Tax burden को divide करने के लिए हमारा basis यहाँ पे क्या है? Benefits received by the individuals. And that is why it overlooks the effects of taxation. It overlooks the possible use of tax policy for economic growth or economic stabilization in the country. So this is the main proposition of benefits received theory. Now we elaborate it because it is important and it is asked in detail. Now the services supplied by the state, you can think about what are the kinds of services which are provided by the state for which you are liable to pay tax as per the benefits received, as per this benefits received approach. So it talks about that the state is providing two categories of services. The first category of services consists of those services to which the principle of exclusion does not apply. So when you are writing in your own words, you can say that the state provides the services into two forms. The first form talks about those services where, remember this word, principle of exclusion does not apply. That means every member of the society consumes these services, all the members of the society, whether they are rich, whether they are poor, whether they are belonging to lower class, upper class. These kinds of differences are not prevailing when you are talking about principle of non-exclusion. In other words, that means nobody is excluded from the consumption of these goods and services. And so every member consumes these services and they should contribute to the state revenue in accordance to the benefits received. But the other category is one. Now the second category of services. This is the first one, where the taxpayers have the option to accept or reject. That means the principle of exclusion does apply here. Those people who are ready to pay for the state services are included in the tax net. Those who do not pay, those who do not want the state services or do not pay for the state services are excluded. That is called principle of exclusion applies in this category of services. Market mechanism is established. Market क्या है? Market is a place where buyers and sellers come in direct contact with each other. So here the seller is the state and the buyer is the citizens of its country. What happens if you are selling the product and those who want can pay and take it and pay accordingly the taxes? Those who do not want should not pay for the state services and so they will not be asked to pay the tax. तो पे का मतलब यहाँ यही है, प्रेफरेंस दिखाने का. आपको ये प्रेफरेंस दिखाना है कि आप स्टेट सर्विसेज चाहते हो, एक्सेप्ट करते हो या रिजेक्ट करते हो. सो देयर इज अ मार्केट रिलेशनशिप एस्टैब्लिश्ड बिटवीन द टू and therefore what the members of the society pay are the fees and the prices and not the taxes in strict sense of the term. Strict sense में जो tax की definition थी, if you remember that, it says that tax is different from price because there is no qui pro quo relationship. But यहाँ पे क्या है? There is a direct relationship, there is an exchange relationship, there is a market relationship. And so the price which the state wants for its state services in terms of taxes becomes what? Price. Becomes what? The fees for that service which you are accepting to get. So they are compulsory payments without qui pro quo. ये आपकी strict sense में definition थी वहाँ पे. And this condition is not satisfied in this case. Why? Because you are relaxing this definition. There is a qui pro quo relationship. There is this is not a compulsory payment. If you want to accept, if you want to avail that state good, then you have to pay. If you don't want to avail that good, you will be excluded and you don't have to pay. So elaborate on these lines, this benefit received theory, that there are, this assumes that as per the benefits received, the state will be asking the taxes. But then there are two kinds of services which are provided by the state, and elaborate on these two types of services. Now the benefit received का historical origin कैसे हुआ, थोड़ा सा उसके बारे में बात की गई. It has a long dated origin and its roots lie in the contract theory of the state. You can remember his name, Professor Edwin R. Seligman. He has surveyed the development of this theory, and the theory was in vogue with German, French and other writers like Grotius, Hobbes, Locke, Hume and Roche. ये सब कुछ नाम है जो कि जर्मन और फ्रेंच इकोनॉमिस्ट थे या सोशल थिंकर्स थे या इकोनॉमिक थिंकर्स थे जिन्होंने की कॉन्ट्रैक्ट थ्योरी ऑफ स्टेट को एक्सेप्ट किया और कहा कि देयर इज अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन द स्टेट एंड द टैक्सपेयर. Subjects of what is their proposition of this theory is that the subjects of a country have a contract with the state for the protection of their lives and property, and the state on its part provides various goods and services. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now there are certain problems. When we want to implement this theory in practice, then there are several problems. What are they? Several problems crop up to apply this theory in practice. Number one, since tax burden is to be distributed between taxpayers in proportion to the benefits received by them from state activities, the authorities have to identify the beneficiaries and measure the benefits derived by them. Clear? आपको बेनिफिट रिसीव लगाना है तो आपको ये भी पता करना होगा कि कितने लोगों को उससे बेनिफिट हो रहा है जो आप स्टेट प्रोवाइड कर रहा है गुड्स और सर्विस, और फिर उनके बेनिफिट का मेजरमेंट करने के लिए भी एक मेजरिंग रॉड होना चाहिए. अब इसमें प्रॉब्लम क्या आती है कि ये जो बेनिफिट है ये एक सब्जेक्टिव कंसेप्ट है एंड मेनी अ टाइम्स यू आर नॉट एबल टू measure it in numerical terms. You are not able to measure it in a scientific manner. It's written here, if you can read, benefit is a subjective thing There is no scientific way of measuring it. So that is a main difficulty, that is the main difficulty in the calculation of benefits received, and that is why it becomes practically difficult to divide the total tax burden among the different members of the society as per the benefits received. First problem. Now the second problem, अगर आप ये कोशिश करें कि इस प्रॉब्लम को हम दूर कर सकते हैं इनकम को यूज करके एज एन इंडिकेटर ऑफ बेनिफिट रिसीव्ड, दैट मीन्स अगर हम ये एज्यूम करते हैं कि जिसकी जितनी इनकम होगी वो उतना ही ज्यादा प्रोटेक्शन उसको मिल रहा है स्टेट से, एंड सो दैट पर्सन शुड बी लायबल और मेड टू पे मोर टैक्सेस. सो इट इज inferred without the protection of the state, the economy just cannot exist, and accordingly it may be inferred that the benefits which members of society derive from the state are in proportion to their incomes. Such an inference implies that taxation should be proportional to income. Matlab, if you are enjoying a higher income, it shows that you are being protected by the state, you are getting more benefits from the state, and so you should be liable to pay more. So that means you are deriving this conclusion that the benefits should be in proportion to your income, and so taxation should also be in terms of in proportion to your income, or in other words it advocates for what? Proportional taxation system. Now this stand was taken by Adam Smith when he said that each individual ought to contribute to public revenue according to his ability. So in other words, income is an indicator of a person's ability to pay, because his ability to pay is determined by the benefits received from the state, by the protection which he is enjoying from the state, and so accordingly the ability to pay of the person should be measured, and then the taxes can be levied on them. Smith equated relative ability to pay of the taxpayer with incomes which they relatively enjoy under the protection of the state. Clear? So, but this narrow reasoning led to contradictory results again. How? Like you can see the names of the economists Roche and Sismondi. Now they argued that which are the people who need more protection of the state are the rich people. They were of the opinion that rich people are those people who need to be protected by the state because they are the real persons who are saving and investing for the economic growth of the country. So they need that kind of protection from the state. And other economists like J.S. Mill, he thought that poor are in greater need of protection from exploitation by the rich. So in other words, there were the thinkers were divided in their reasoning. One was advocating about progressive taxation, the other was advocating about regressive rates. कि जो पुअर है उनके ऊपर आप ज्यादा लगाइए, कोई कह रहा था रिच है जो उसके ऊपर ज्यादा लगाइए. क्यों? क्योंकि as per the benefits received. Now benefits received is in terms of protection of the state. If rich needs more protection, that means they are getting more benefits, so they should be liable to pay more in terms of progressive taxation. If you feel that the poor are in greater need of protection of state, then the poor are assumed to be deriving more benefits, so they should be liable to pay more, or in other words, it leads to regressive taxation system. समझ में आ रहा है?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in 1888, Antonio Di Vitti Marco, another Italian economist, made an assumption. ये जरूरी नहीं है कि आप सारे इकोनॉमिक थिंकर्स को लिखिए, जितने याद रह जाएं उतने लिखिए, लेकिन ये हिस्टोरिकल बैकग्राउंड है और उनके स्टेटमेंट्स हैं फ्रॉम टाइम टू टाइम ऑन दिस बेनिफिट्स रिसीव्ड अप्रोच. He made an assumption similar to that of Sachs, that the members of the society consume public services in proportion to their incomes. जितनी आपकी इनकम होगी आप उसी हिसाब से अपनी पब्लिक सर्विसेज को कंज्यूम करोगे. बट he also brings in the question of marginal utility of income to the taxpayers. अब यहाँ पे इन्होंने एक वर्ड और जोड़ दिया है जो कि कंसेप्ट आप ऑलरेडी पढ़ चुके हो कि हर चीज में लॉ ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी अप्लाई होता है. सो सेम वे इनकम पे भी अप्लाई होगा, और जिसकी जितनी ज्यादा इनकम होगी उसकी एडिशनल यूनिट से उसको मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी कम होती जाएगी. And that is why if you read the further lines, since larger incomes bring in lower marginal utility, the richer citizen ought to pay more for the same services. Rich people are assumed to enjoy larger income, so their marginal utility is less as per the law of diminishing marginal utility, so they should be taxed more for the same service. Right? Because उनका नुकसान इतना नहीं होगा. They are already having lesser marginal utility from their income. Now,
can you repeat this point?
This point talks about the law of marginal utility, diminishing marginal utility. आपने BA फर्स्ट ईयर में भी पढ़ा था कि जैसे कंजम्पशन में कंज्यूमर एक्सपीरियंस करता है कि जैसे जैसे वो एडिशनल यूनिट्स ऑफ ब्रेड खाता है, फॉर एग्जांपल आपका वो एग्जांपल था वहाँ पे, तो वैसे वैसे एडिशनल यूनिट्स ऑफ ब्रेड से जो उसको एडिशनल मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी मीन्स एडिशनल यूटिलिटी जो मिलती है वो कम होती जाती है. So the same reasoning Antonio Di Vitti Di Marco applied for income, and he said that the higher your income is, as you get additional units of income, as you get more advantages in terms of incomes, you will feel less utility from the additional units of income. And that means it's not so much preferred by you, or it's not so much important for you. You give less preference to your increase in your incomes than the poor person, because the poor has less income, so the marginal utility will be more, and the rich has more income, so the marginal utility will be less. So as per the marginal utility, if you are imposing taxes, then the rich person should be asked to pay more for the same service. Are you getting? So he is
Yes,
not
ma'am.
asserting that the richer people secure greater benefits from the state services and is maintained by some others. The richer are not to pay more because of greater benefits, but because of lesser sacrifice involved in paying taxes. Sacrifice means the loss of utility, because the richer person is experiencing lesser loss of utility in terms of incomes, so they are required to pay more. And they are to pay more taxes because the proportional taxation hurts the poor more and the richer less, on the basis of law of diminishing marginal utility. So here we are not exactly measuring the benefits, but what we are measuring is the loss in terms of utility, or the loss in terms of additional utility which the people derive from the additional units of their incomes which they enjoy from the state. Then 1896, Knut Wicksell, a Swedish economist, he put his theory on an ethical basis. This system of imposing taxes is good because it leaves the taxpayers free to opt out of a state service. That means he left it free. जैसे हम कोई प्रोग्राम करते हैं डिपार्टमेंट में, कोई एक्टिविटी करते हैं, why I don't make it forcible to you, why I just make it voluntary? Because I want that everyone has to understand the benefits of these activities. Now you are mature enough to understand that these activities are for your good, right? So similar thing was there. Knut Wicksell was of the opinion that if we will impose public services on the people and ask them forcibly to pay for it, then what will happen? The people will sometime go against the state. The people will always feel dissatisfied. They will not be happy. So I can also make this rule कि if you don't attend the activity, if you don't participate in the activity, your attendance will not be marked. But then I don't do this. So ethical basis पे it is correct, because ethics says that the people should be motivated to attend these programs. The people should understand the logic behind these activities and think it is not for one person's benefit. It is for the benefit of all the students who are a part of the department, right? So that similar thing is happening here. The basic tenet of his thesis is that tax system should be based upon voluntary and unanimous action. That means you will not be feeling burdened then if it will be a voluntary and unanimous action. If you want, you get the state service and you pay for it. If you don't want, you opt out of the state service, you don't have to pay for it. Clear? So this is how this economist Knut Wicksell talked about the ethical system of taxation and the division of tax burden. Now, the most rigorous formulation of the benefit received approach was known as Lindell solution. Eric Lindell, ये नाम याद रखिएगा. In 1919, he gave this theory, which was known as voluntary exchange theory of public finance, where he gave the most formal and rigorous formulation of the benefits received. And he said what he discusses is, he assumed that there are two taxpayers just for the simplification of his theory. He wanted it to be explained in a proper manner. वैसे तो reality में बहुत सारे taxpayers होते हैं, but he discusses this problem in the context of two taxpayers. And these two taxpayers, another assumption, they have the liberty to reveal their preferences for state services. That means people have a liberty. That means ethical basis पे tax लग रहा है. That means you are having an option either to accept or reject the state services. You are not forced, and against the corresponding tax liability. So, in other words, it's a kind of voluntary exchange between the taxes paid and the state services received, which is to be determined on the basis of preference or demand schedule of the taxpayers for the state service. Now, what has become important now? How do you reveal your preference? How do you want those services? What is your demand schedule for the state service? That will determine your tax liability, and accordingly you must pay. If you don't reveal your preference for the state services, you have the option to opt out. You will not be asked to pay tax. That was called the most rigorous solution given by Eric Lindell on the basis of your preference schedule. That's why he made this assumption that there are two taxpayers who have the liberty to reveal their preferences. And he assumed further that these two individuals constitute the society. Further, he is assuming it. It is important, क्योंकि अगर आप ये assume नहीं करोगे तो सोसाइटी में तो बहुत सारे इंडिविजुअल्स होंगे जिनके एक्शंस इन दोनों इंडिविजुअल को अफेक्ट करेंगे. So we are assuming that they are the only ones who are constituting that society, and then tries to work out the optimum level of state activities. जो आपने maximum social advantage में पढ़ा था कि we want to determine the optimum level of state activities. That means this is the point beyond which the state should not increase its taxation, should not increase its public expenditure. That was the optimum level of state activities. And then work out equilibrium division of tax burden between the two individuals on the other. Okay? Now, Lindell ignores the problem of equitable distribution of income. Equitable distribution of income की प्रॉब्लम को लिंडल ने यहाँ पे एड्रेस नहीं किया, एंड जैसा भी डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन है इनकम और वेल्थ इक्वालिटी का इन द सोसाइटी और इकोनॉमी, उसको गिवन मान लिया. ये भी एक एजम्पशन था, बिकॉज अगर वो उसमें पढ़ते तो फिर वो टैक्स को प्रेफरेंस के हिसाब से नहीं लगा सकते थे, because then maybe the poor has more preference, and so accordingly you can say कि भाई पुअर ने ज्यादा रिवील किया है अपना प्रेफरेंस फॉर स्टेट सर्विसेज, तो हम उनके ऊपर ज्यादा टैक्स लगाएं. सो अकॉर्डिंगली इट विल लीड टू रिग्रेसिव टैक्सेशन एंड मोर inequalities in income and wealth distribution. So this assumption was essential in this sense, that when he tried to show the demand schedules and on the basis of that the division of tax burden, then he had to make this assumption that there already exists an equitable distribution of income. And for that he tries to solve three problems. What are they? Number one, the extent of the state activity, that is what is the optimum level of state activities, that is optimum level of state activities in terms of expenditure activities, in terms of taxation activities. That problem will be addressed through Lindell solution. The second is when you allocate the public expenditure on various heads, like how much the government will allocate on health, how much the government will allocate on education, how much the government will allocate on infrastructure. These are all various goods and services on which the expenditure has to be allocated. So this solution will help them to address this problem. And the third is tax burden. How to allocate the tax burden among the different taxpayers. In this case, there are two taxpayers. Have you understood Lindell's solution in a nutshell? What are the three problems which he addressed through this, and what is the kind of assumptions which he made to show the solution? Voluntary exchange theory. It is a voluntary exchange theory. Say yes so that we can proceed.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, following Lindell, there was another economist who gave this diagrammatic. He agreed to Lindell, and his name was Howard R. Bowen. You can write it. Bowen. Howard, Howard. So Lindell's theory was explained by Howard R. Bowen by means of a simple diagram, which you can see here. In this diagram, on the x-axis, you can make this diagram and then we will finish off today's lecture. The supply of and demand for state services, these are the demand schedules for the individual taxpayers. जैसे Lindell ने कहा कि हम preferences देखेंगे and accordingly we will put up the taxes. And on the y-axis, you are showing the amount of taxes. Now, if you see this SS dash, the horizontal line parallel to x-axis, it is the supply schedule of the state services which shows the per unit cost of different amounts of state services. SS dash is the supply schedule of the state services which shows the per unit cost of different amounts of state services. Now we also further assume in this diagram that there are two members in the society, A and B. And another assumption which we have to keep in mind while drawing the diagram is, if you see this DA, D-A is what the demand preference of the A consumer, and DB, DB- is the demand schedule of the taxpayer B, which we have already assumed that there are two members which comprise the whole society. So A taxpayer and B taxpayer is revealing their preferences for the state services through these demand schedules. And the total supply, the third assumption is, in the drawing the diagram, is that whatever the total supply of the state services are there, it will be consumed jointly by A and B. Now, first point is MA, right? So, for the supplies of state services lesser than OMA, A is ready to contribute or A is ready to bear more than the full cost of state services. If you see this MA, if you are extending it to the demand curve of taxpayer A, it is touching it here. So automatically it shows that depending upon his elasticity of demand for the state services, the taxpayer is ready to contribute the whole cost if he is getting lesser than OMA amount of supply. But for a supply greater than that or larger than OMA, his desired contribution becomes smaller. For example, for a supply of ON of state services, for a supply of ON of state services to be jointly consumed by both A and B, the demand curve of A is cutting it at E point, if you are seeing. So Mr. A is ready to contribute how much? NE. And Mr. B is ready to contribute how much? NF. This B schedule, demand curve. Therefore, the state can collect a tax revenue of NQ per unit of state services. So, this NQ is the total cost which is jointly borne by the taxpayer A and B, because as per their demand or state services, and NE is the contribution made by the taxpayer A and NF is the contribution made by taxpayer B, depending upon their preference schedule. So by the vertical addition of demand curves D dash A and D dash B, we can get the aggregate or the total demand schedules. That is DT dash, DT, DT dash. This is what? The combined schedule of taxpayer A and B, the total demand schedule. Now, if you see, the supply curve is going through G point. So the cost of supplies of ON of state services is how much? NG per unit, right? NG per unit. But the demand or the preference is, total demand is NQ. So the cost of supply is NG per unit, whereas the cost of supply is only NG per unit. What does it show? Can you tell me? The cost is NG per unit cost, and the demand or the price which they are ready to pay as per the total aggregate demand schedule is NQ. What does it show? Profit or loss? Tell me. How much the state can collect in terms of revenue because of the preferences showed by them is NQ. But actually the cost of providing those services is NG.
NG minus NQ?
NQ minus NG. Na? NQ is greater than NG.
Yes, ma'am. I thought NQ is good.
So this much is the profit. This is the profit of the government in this way. QG is the profit, right? तो अगर कोई इंडिविजुअल होता तो वो इस प्रॉफिट को ले लेता, लेकिन चूंकि स्टेट की बात हो रही है, गवर्नमेंट की बात हो रही है, और गवर्नमेंट किस लिए इलेक्ट होती है? फॉर द इकोनॉमिक एंड सोशल वेलफेयर. सो यू कैन राइट हियर, सिंस द स्टेट इज नॉट इंटरेस्टेड, since the state is not interested in making a profit out of supply of these services, it respects the desires of the taxpayers and invests this profit in the further production of state services, expansion of state services. So this NQ minus NG, which is a profit of QG, right? It is the profit which is not going to be kept by the government, because the state is elected for a different motive. So the state will invest this profit for increasing the production of the state activities, because they are respecting the individual preferences, and increases the production from ON to OM. Again, the demand and supply becomes equal at this point. That is, new equilibrium is at O, and that is P point, where this is called the optimum level of state activities, where the supply of the state services is equal to OM, and the cost is MP per unit, which is jointly provided by both the taxpayers in the society, A and B. How much A is contributing for MP? MP अगर आपकी टोटल कॉस्ट है, और आपने ये माना हुआ था पहले भी कि जो आपके टैक्स पेयर्स हैं वो इंडिविजुअली इसको पे कर देंगे, मतलब इसमें कोई और इंडिविजुअल नहीं है आपकी सोसाइटी में, ओनली यू हैव टू इंडिविजुअल्स, दे आर A and B. So how are you going to divide it? ये जो MP टोटल कॉस्ट है ये कितना दे रहा है? A, MJ as per their demand schedule, and MK is the taxation towards the payment of cost from taxpayer B. They jointly consume this OM state services. That was also an assumption.
So what is
Okay.
NJ and MK?
NJ and MK. MJ is given by the A and MK is given by the B, and jointly they are paying towards the per unit cost of MP. So this is the Lindell solution explained by Howard R. Bowen in terms of this diagram. So I will send you these files on the WhatsApp group so that you can read it and write it. And then next class, that is, I think I don't have it tomorrow. We'll have it next week. Then we will do the limitations.